were just passing by, but you started something. I may never know why, but you started something. With your glance, a new romance was in the making. Just like the sun starts the flowers to waking, I knew all about love. I said this can't happen, but then you came along and caught my heart napping. Now each hour and each new day will always be spring, 'cause you really started something. I knew all about love. I said this can't happen, but then you came along and caught my heart napping. Now each hour and each new day will always be spring, 'cause you really started something.
Grab your coat, get your hat, leave your worries on the doorstep. Just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. Can't you hear that pitter-pat? And that happy tune is your step. Why, life can be so sweet on the sunny side of the street. Now I used to walk in the shade with my blues on parade, baby, but I'm not afraid, 'cause this rover, baby, I just crossed over. If I never had a cent, I'll be as rich as Rockefeller. Gold dust at my feet.
Are we ready?
On a
Not quite yet.
the street.
Okay, can I make sure all the board members have their mics on? And I messed up the placement of the mics, so we're going to do a roll call and just to correct the numbering on our microphones. So can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Zink,
Here?
Kirk Green,
Here.
Tipton, Scott Hopkins,
Here.
Stephanie Poole,
Here.
Howard Whittash.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Perfect. Let's moving on. Is there anyone from the board, anyone from the public wishing to address the board for an item that is not on today's agenda? Seeing no one come forward, I will close public comment and go on to item B, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, which was June 23rd.
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All right. I wasn't here, so would you mind leading this?
Okay. Any comments on item 1? Item 2, 3, and 4 did not really have extensive comments. Or 4. I have some comments on 4, unless someone else wants to go.
Don't have any comments.
Under the motion on item 4, number 2, relocate the air conditioner unit away from the front yard. And then you could delete number 6. And,
Away from front yard or side yard? Is it-
well, it has 2 front yards,
Okay, front,
so yeah,
okay.
it's away from the front yard.
Okay. And which one? Delete?
Delete 6, and instead 7 should read, provide door and window details and all other exterior architectural details. And then there's number 5. Any comments on 5?
No.
I think that does it.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
There'll be 3 abstentions.
3 abstentions.
Yeah.
Sank, Hopkins, and Fung.
Yes, we were not here at that meeting. Thank you.
All right.
Moving on to item C, which is the consent calendar for June 30th.
What about
Oops.
one in the back of the other minutes?
Isn't
Is
that a
it-
continuation of the consent?
It is.
And we approved that the day of the meeting. So that was approved
Okay.
on that 23rd.
Got it.
Okay, so we're on the consent calendar, which was last Monday, June 30th. I need a
Move
first.
to approve.
First by Stephanie, second by
Second.
Scott.
And Mr. Chair, item A at 120 South Hope Street was granted project design and final approvals as submitted. Item B, 402 South Salinas Street was granted project design and final approvals as submitted. Item C at 1919 Cliff Drive, it was approval of review after final with a condition, several conditions. Item D, 1522 Cecil Cook Place was granted project design and final approvals with conditions. And item E at 3943 State Street was granted final approval of the review after final as submitted.
Great. Any other discussion?
Yes, question.
I have a question.
We'll go
Go
with
ahead.
Howard first.
One of my projects was on the consent.
So why don't you just
What does that mean about, what are
Just
my
abstain.
limitations here?
just abstain from voting?
Abstain
that
from,
item.
on that item?
Yeah.
Okay.
The question is about who reviewed the landscaping for the
Item E.
2943 D, E, sorry.
For the
Item
Five
E.
Point Shopping Center?
Who reviewed the landscaping for that? Okay. Okay, so
Courtney and I.
Courtney was here.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
With some minor changes to the trees.
Okay,
Yeah.
just checking because the dates and vacations and stuff.
Yeah.
That's a great question. With that, any other discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions?
I abstain from item B.
Okay. And that's not on the agenda, but do we have a consent for today?
There was no consent meeting
All right.
today.
Let's move on to item D, which is announcements, requests by applicants, and any other future agenda items.
Just the announcement that Courtney Miller is absent today.
Okay. I should also make an announcement that we reviewed a project had to do with the Aurora Borough Bath restroom replacement building, and that's going to Planning Commission on Thursday of this week. And I'll be going to represent the ABR board.
Thank you.
All right. Item E, subcommittee reports. I actually have an announcement that Scott and I will be meeting with the Southern California Gas Company on Wednesday to review those sites having to do with their new wireless meter reading.
That's the wireless meters. Yes.
Reading. Anything else? If not, let's move on to item 1 of the agenda, which is the US 101 from Quarantina to the west of the city limits. This is a new item, so I will read the project description. This is a proposal to install roadside safety improvements, including contrasting hardscape treatments to various landscaping areas abutting the freeway on-ramp and relocation of irrigation pull boxes and roadside signage. This is a courtesy review. I have your name for the record and your presentation.
Chair Zink, members of the board, thank you for your time today. My name is David Beard. I'm the project manager with Caltrans in our District 5 office in San Luis Obispo. I've met you before, at least. It's good to see you again. And the Department of Transportation is the applicant for this project, which we brought to you today. Let me first say that we've enjoyed a good relationship with this board and with the city as far as interacting on how to get the best architectural aesthetic features incorporated into our projects, and so we hope to continue that tradition today. This is a roadside safety project, and the purpose of that is to make sure that our maintenance forces, who are out there every single day, have the safest possible working environment and create a safe environment for the traveling public as well. So there are certain roadside features that can be made a better working environment, safer working environment. And also there are certain areas that can't be maintained safely because of where they're located and the exposure to traffic. It's our goal to minimize or eliminate exposure to traffic in the most dangerous parts of the freeway. And so we have ways to address that as well. So that's what roadside safety projects are intended to do. Now with me are two people from our landscape architecture branch. To my right is Joseph Arnold, to my left, and next to him, Bob Carr. And so they're going to speak to you more about the particulars of the roadside safety project that we've brought to you today.
Okay.
Thank you, David. So we're here on this review. The purpose of the project is roadside safety. What this really amounts to, and the reason we want to hear from you, this is the gore areas we're talking about, you know, where the on-ramps merge or diverge from the highway and those skinny points that stick out. So it's a gore area. And the safety aspect of it is it becomes, it's quite a bit of exposure to our maintenance workers, and then that has secondary effects to the traveling public as well when those areas get, and there's aesthetic implications when they get weedy and need high degree of maintenance per unit. So throughout the state, and certainly in this county and the city, have begun a program of paving a certain portion of those from the tip back to a certain distance. So they become a paved area that eliminates your weeds and your trash buildup and that sort of thing. The contrasting surface name that you see in the introductory letter and whatnot, that's about if you make them exactly the same as the pavement, the traveling public might treat them as a road surface, and it's inappropriate for that. So the contrasting surface idea is really about it should look different than the pavement, than the asphalt. You know, they're asphalt. You know, generally the roadway surfaces are. So we have these paved areas that have a different appearance than the roadway intentionally. They're concrete usually, but it really can have quite effect on communities as they're at all year. In this case, where we have 29, 30,
there's
39.
39 locations throughout the entire length of the project.
It's your ramps, and so the package here, we have a lot of information, and I understand here we have the plan set that has every location, and I don't know if you have a cover of this, but you can get a sense. I can certainly pass this around and leave it with you. It has, we have highlighted areas of all throughout town, the majority of the town. And then we have.
If you could point to what's under the camera, then the
I see.
listening public can
there you have
view
it. Set.
Yeah.
The listening public. So the larger set, there's some incidental work that's also being done for the project, but our concern is mostly these aesthetic issues, and so each one of the The circles that have highlights associated with them are the locations where we're talking about this paved beyond the gore, just our gore treatment areas.
If you don't mind, if we can just go through these before and after, because this is really good, and then we can go through the site plan. But basically, this is the way it looks right now with the dirt area with a little bit of landscaping, and this is what you're proposing?
Right. Correct. Yeah, and the real quick of the information is before you, and we'll get to that. So we have the overview. This is to give you a sense of how many locations that may inform some of your decision in terms of, do you want it all to be the same? Do you have, areas that you may want to put a hierarchy of treatments or whatever thing like that we can get into. So this is your overview. We've also provided photographs of of each one of these locations. You have a real world photograph, and that's some of this supplemental measure. And then the ones that you're referring to, these are just some example locations that Joseph took and did a real quick study on 3 kind of, first cut treatments that could be considered. And so you are seeing Joseph, you took these photographs, so specifically, what are we looking at here?
Let me go back to the first one then.
Yeah.
So back at the first one, this is the existing condition as it stays in field currently. This shows the length of the area, and it's concrete highlighting the area that would be affected by this. And then there's following treatments proposed with each one that reflect what's in the corridor already or adjacent to the area immediately. And this is a split face block, so it's a roughened surface, textured surface. And then the next is a mission tile theme, so it keeps in the Santa Barbara feeling throughout the length. And then we have concrete, which exists at Garden Street and Unoli at that corner there. And that's saw-cut concrete with a mission tile look to it. And then the last is a textured stamp, slate stamp theme, and that's down in Carpinteria area currently.
Okay.
Montecito, is that the...
Montecito, yes.
Yeah, no, that's it, yeah.
So this is, again, same 3 things from a different vantage point, which is great. This is a good example.
Different location. So
different
it gives you
location.
kind of the feel of how the different alignments affect the
So
look
this
as
is
well.
just straight concrete.
Correct.
Top one is the split face,
Correct, the roughened surface.
mission tile theme.
Yes.
And really, so looking at those, and these are real simple, these aren't simulations, just a kind of a quick study on that. But we're hoping to hear from you if, any one of these are variations for us, as long as it meets our criteria. We don't expect anything elaborate. Stamped concrete is generally what we would talk about, stamped and colored concrete. And it's really to hear from you if you have an idea other than these, or you want us to run with some other aspect of these, or something about these that you don't think fits.
Okay.
We want to know that. It really is, it meets our safety criteria, and you like the aesthetics of it. That's fantastic. But again, so it's just looking at these by themselves and get kind of a larger picture. So the project we've brought before you today, there are other ones as well. There's one that we're not far enough quite along yet that will start. This starts just a side of Milpas. So there's one that's going to pick up. They will start within the city limits again and head south down through Carp and all that. That's going to do the same treatments there. So there's 3 locations in that project that would be within your city limits, and we were hoping that whatever direction we get on these, we could apply to those 3. But that gives you a little bit the bigger picture on the extent of these things and how that affects. Do you want the city of Santa Barbara to be unique when you hit the city limits, or is there something about some nodes at certain entry points that you might want something different, or there's those type of things that we'd really love to hear from you if you care to help us with those.
That's a great presentation.
So I think, at this point, if there's something that you have these ones before you, if there's something you like or don't like about these, or we're way off base, or
Actually, let's hold off to comments or questions. It's a great presentation, and what I want to do is open up public comment and then return it back to the board for questions, and let's have a dialogue. So with that, I will open up public comment. Do we have any letters? Okay, I'll close public comment, return it back to the board for questions. And Stephanie?
So is that the extent of what we're looking at here today? Just these gore spaces that are kind of the pie-shaped spaces at the on-ramps and the off-ramps, and that's it. We're not looking at pull boxes or relocation of irrigation pull boxes or roadside signage or any landscaping issues. None of that.
Well, that's correct. Many of those things we don't consider to have much aesthetic ramifications. The movement of irrigation pole boxes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you're fine.
And the signage is just relocation of existing signs. And there's, sometimes when those are right in the middle of a gore area too, the maintenance of those it can be an unsafe situation. So those might be moved back a little bit further. Of interest, though, there is some shrub removal associated with this project. There's some incidental shrubs at locations where the criteria for the paving would affect a shrub that would be removed.
Are all the lengths of these eye-shaped areas the same?
No.
No?
Not all the lengths, because some of the way that the geometry of the on-ramp or off-ramp is set, what is similar to each one is the distance from outside White Stripe, to outside White Stripe, and that's 36 feet. So wherever that occurs on that gore point, that's where it gets paved to. Some are only 20 feet wide, some are wider than that, 33 feet, I think they're of paving.
Questions from other people?
Well, that was my question as well. So the longest one is 33 feet?
No,
Are there any longer?
One, I think it's 248 feet is the length of the longest one. It's very narrow. It's a very narrow space.
Okay. And we don't have diagrams of what those look like?
Other than each location is shown here.
You
but
have a
not in
photograph
plan.
in there.
There's
in
pictures,
plan.
yes, there's pictures of the existing condition.
You might find that. Also throughout this plan set, the one that Joseph just referenced, it's on C20. The C20, I just happened to find it. See, this is an example of, it's the width of the gore that is one of the controlling factor of how far you carry back. So if in this case, it's a very narrow, long gore, so it takes you quite a longitudinal distance to get you to that magic 30-some feet. So this is actually, these are every 100 feet. These are 100-foot ticks. 1, 2, 3. That's a 400-plus length of concrete that we're talking. Now, they're not all like that, but that's a good example. And I'm glad you brought that up. And therein the importance of us getting something that the community supports and likes, and we come up that represents the community well, because these aren't really, some of them are very small, but some of them can be quite a statement, if that's what you want a statement in the first, so they are not to be taken lightly, we don't feel.
I actually have two questions. On Salinas, when we just did this widening of the 101 freeway in this zone, what did we do paving pattern-wise in these gore sections? What was the solution that we resolved here? Is it one of the 5 we're looking at, or was this resolved differently? You know what I'm talking about?
It looks like you're pointing to the on-ramp and off-ramp at Milpas Street.
Milpas, or I'm sorry, and then there was the Salinas one before that.
Right. So those are brand new, and they don't have any proposals at this time for this kind of treatment right now. They're not part of this project. So those, I believe, they didn't have the contrasting treatment. It wasn't the standard that was required at that time. So if you drive through there now, I think you find that they don't have that treatment.
Question. So the stuff that was built like 2 years ago was built under a different set of guidelines. And today the guideline is 32 feet with the paving in there.
Correct.
Okay. My second question is, of the 5 different choices, how do you clean that? How often does it get cleaned? And which one is more difficult to clean with your sweepers versus what's easier to clean with your sweepers? And then what happens when it's at an angle and all this other kinds of stuff? So how do you maintain it so it doesn't look like dead tires and crap and debris like we see in LA?
So the discussion was conducted with maintenance to see their ultimate desire and what they can maintain out there and what their machines are able to maintain. When it's a flat surface, the less roughened an uneven surface they could have, the easier it is to clean with a sweeper truck to go across it, and it keeps a minimal time that they have to be out there and disrupt any traffic patterns. With that being said, the split face would be difficult for them to maintain. The roughened surface, it would collect material, and sand, sediment, things like that would be easier to clean out of it, but the tractor tires, things, or semi-truck tires, things along those lines, the other deleterious material, they'd have a harder time picking that up right away. But then on an angle, typically the ones that happen on an angle are behind guardrail, so it's easier for them to go out and maintain that pick material off if it's larger. If it's smaller sediment material, it doesn't get cleaned. The rainwater would wash it down over time.
Okay, and then the versions, is the tile one actually set tile that's in the concrete, or is that scored and colored a different variety?
Scored and colored, correct.
Okay, so
sawn, concrete sawn edges. And
was
then,
it two different colors for that pattern?
no, just one. So
It looks like
it's sun angle on the.
So this, what I was wondering, this isn't like laid-in tile that are going to pop off.
No, they are not.
So this is just a colored band, and this is just regular gray band or whatever.
Correct.
Split face. Okay.
The department generally feels that these are easier to maintain than, if maintenance gets deferred and weeds develop and then trash collects into those as well. So these are, all of these are considered by the department to be a more easily maintained situation than without them.
Okay. Questions from somebody else?
Yeah.
You're up,
Do you
Scott.
guys have to worry about stormwater management? Do you have to replace the new paving or landscape elsewhere? Or?
So with this project, we didn't meet that threshold for the corridor length,
Okay.
so it is not a concern underneath this project.
Okay. And the split face finish, that's a stamped concrete of some sort?
It would be a stamp that would, I'm not quite up to speed on exactly how it would happen, but the relief would be in the form liner itself and then pulled off.
Okay. And all of these, they're proposed more or less flush with the surrounding asphalt? is that-
Correct. Flush, exactly, with a clean sawn edge on the asphalt, so we're not getting jagged lines or anything like that.
Okay.
If I may, related to that question, you've probably seen these other places. As you're driving around the state, you'll start to notice these a little bit more. And we've seen many applications where they actually will put a plain concrete band around the outside to really differentiate it. And that's not our personal favorite from an aesthetic standpoint. And we made the assumptions in the simulations you're saying that we would just bring it flush up to the edge, though whatever the other whatever treatment we get direction on, we'd just bring that right up to the edge of the adjacent asphalt, rather than having like a 12-inch white colored, effectively concrete band going around it.
Okay, those are my questions.
We're keeping it flush as well by removing curb and dike as much as possible to make it very flush and very clean, appealing nature to it.
Great. Any other questions? Tip?
Yeah, I guess my question is, so the project is roadside safety improvements. Is it a safety for the Caltrans employees, or for what? For the public?
For both. It's
What do you
primarily,
mean by-
well, it starts with the Caltrans employee, the workers that have to get out there. A statewide goal is to reduce exposure of those folks to the traveling public. And with that as a, I think a statewide policy, in order to ensure that, many times the secondary effect is you'll see lane closures or shoulder closures, things like that, to make a safe workplace for the Caltrans employee. We were closing lanes, and that have a secondary effect on traffic patterns and that. And sometimes, so that it has a secondary large public at large safety component to it.
So mainly it's for, that means if you get on the freeway, get out the freeway, you can see clearly, so you don't drive into those areas. Is that the idea?
No, the primary area is the maintenance aspect of them. And right now, if the little bit of asphalt ends, and then there's an area that doesn't get maintained, it's dirt, and it becomes weedy, and so our folks get out there and manually clean those, manually weed those, and whatever it takes, remove trash and those sort of things.
Remove all the manpower. You do something
you
that's
try and rewrite-
permanent, no maintenance required, just like paving.
Yes, it has those larger goals, but there's trade-offs, and there's aesthetic trade-offs, and so how can we get that? How can we see meets the aesthetic, the corridor goals, and still meets those safety objectives?
Yeah, because my opinion, when you get on the freeway, you keep your eyes on the road and you don't want to get sidetracked by anything that bling on the road that look left, look right, and run into someone in the process of doing so. So I'm just so that's mainly just to keep it easier for the cleaning and but not too distracting for the drivers.
Let's see if there's any other questions.
A little one.
Howard, and then we'll go to comments.
So this work that's being proposed, does it anticipate any other changes to the on-ramps and off-ramps as a result of upcoming Caltrans, changes to make things more safe? What happens to this work? Does it just get redone, or?
Well, Dave is a project manager. He might know the large global picture about upcoming projects. We do recognize, we try not to do throwaway work, but Dave probably can answer that.
Right, and any future projects to restore the pavement, for example, would have to either work around these or replace them, but they'd still want to keep them in the same locations. Most of this freeway, as you know, is relatively new, and we don't have any big widening projects through this stretch, so those ramps will, for the most part, stay put for the long term.
We all done with questions?
Yeah, I have one more question.
All right.
So it seemed to me like one of the reasons you're doing this, because you are having issues now with Caltrans employees getting hurt on the job. Is it really a problem? Is it really a big problem, a small problem? Can you share with us? Is it a big issue?
Well, it's statewide. It's a concern, and it should be everyone's concern, really, because there's a lot of implications even for the taxpayer. But we try and do things. We try and do preventative things, and we look at trends and that sort of thing. We try not to. We certainly would react to a statistical change or something like that, but we anticipate those things.
How is it now? Currently, do you have issues now? Like you have once a week someone get run over by someone, or is anything like that happen at all?
I don't know about that. We have data on that so much. Dave, you might know about that.
We do have experience with certain areas of the roadway that are more dangerous. And the area between the ramps and the freeways are especially tough for maintenance workers because they have no escape route if a vehicle happens to go into that area, for example.
Right. But I guess my question is, do you have any statistic on the issue? Like you have once every 2 years someone get hurt, killed?
I'm sure that exists, but we don't have that.
You just do it because you feel like you want to do something.
Well, this is in response to the growing awareness that there's a safety issue out there. But no, I don't have the numerical data for you.
Okay. Let's go to comment, but before we do that, I want to check with staff on something. I close public comment. Is Kellum DeForest speaking on this project, which is the 101 freeway thing, or is he for a different project? I'm sorry I wanted to check with.
Thank you.
Is it all right with the board that we reopen public comment?
Yes.
Sure. All right. Before you start, Kellum, let's get a microphone on you.
Yeah, okay.
And then
Good
announce your name.
afternoon. I was just wondering if this couldn't be planted in some kind of drought-resistant planting that wouldn't take much water or maintenance. It would certainly look better than the pavement that's proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we'll reclose public comment. Move to comments from the board to the applicant, and you'll be coming back later with additional information that this is just your first review? Or how do you see?
We've prepared all our information for this meeting here, so hopefully this discussion will put us in the right direction.
Okay. So this is a courtesy review. Comments from the board. Howard, you can be first.
Okay. So the bottom line is that the planters that were provided many years ago have not been maintained. They are expensive to maintain, they are dangerous to maintain. And in order to reduce cost, manpower, cost of maintenance, and this problem, it is this proposal to basically concretize the strips leading in and out of the freeways, on-ramps, off-ramps, is proposed. And so to make this appealing, they have different textures. That's what we're looking at. So the question in my mind is it nobler to look at an unkempt landscape or to look at a enhanced concrete paving? For me, that's what the issue is. And I just overheard Mr. DeForest talk about the possibility of some sort of low-maintenance ground cover that drought tolerant, and you can drive over it and it comes back. It's a weed. There are ground covers that do that. I've seen them. I've walked on them. They're indestructible. But the other thing is that I wanted to comment is that this is not very fair to you because there's not a dialogue here, but his comment was, this project basically runs through the city of Santa Barbara, and it starts at Quarantina, is that right? And it goes out to turn somewhere out at the western end of the city? A portion of that, the two gateways to Santa Barbara, basically, is it Garden and then Castillo and then Carrillo. Those go the gateways to the historic part of the city. I think those somehow need to be looked at differently than the gateways to other parts of the city. I'd like very much to hear comment if there's any little remote place in your souls that would entertain the idea of this these indestructible landscaping that you could drive over and it would basically require no upkeep or very little. I do understand the problem, costs, labor, safety, etc. So those are two comments about the proposal.
Thank you, Howard.
I have comments. I think that Santa Barbara is one of the most unique cities that you drive through up and down the coast of California, and it is so aesthetically because we care about landscaping here and have gone to extraordinary measures to make our freeways feel small and quaint and are beautifully landscaped. And I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all solution here, and I don't think it's appropriate. And it's really hard from your presentation to know which one of these situations gets a 30-foot little transition and which one gets a 200-foot. It's just not clear on this presentation what you're planning to do at each one of these locations, and I don't think it's necessarily appropriate. I can see it being a safety issue at some of them when one is merging onto a freeway. Don't see it necessarily a priority for off-ramps. I just don't see that there's a one single solution, as Howard said, for every single one of these locations. And
great.
That's it.
I'll just tag onto that a little bit. I can see the value from a safety standpoint. For example, let's just take this example right here.
Get it in the center of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
And the pointer is, thanks. Where, to have growies out at this extended end where maybe you have only 3 or 4 feet, 5 feet of width, and it's getting very narrow, and cars are merging in this area. I can see that as being a really hazardous area to work, to try to maintain planting, and I don't really see the usefulness of trying to plant in an area like that. But once you start to get back here where it's, 7, 8, 10 feet wide, 12 feet wide, and there is more room, there's barriers to work around, there's less danger. You could even do it, you could do the maintenance with a truck parked alongside the maintenance person, and just as opposed to sweeping the area, you do a little trimming and throw it in the truck and you're done. So it seems like there, as the previous board member suggested, that these really should be considered on a case-by-case basis very carefully, and they do have aesthetic impacts, as you're pointing out, and could really be enhanced by having some, very sturdy, drought-tolerant plantings happening in those areas, as well as providing a better visual barrier to drivers. I think there would be an added safety benefit to having something growing there, as opposed to just a flat surface, which looks like, it's a different color, but you could still drive over it, right? So you have that perception that you could still drive over it, and people do. You see it all the time. I know it's against the law, but people do it. So I would encourage you strongly to look at, especially where these things are, 300 or 400, even 50 feet long, and getting 33 feet wide. That's huge. That's a huge area to just concrete over. So I would again recommend that you look at reducing the lengths where you can, and when their expanses get large enough to look at planting as an option.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to follow on this road because I'm going to follow on what he was just commenting on. In this photograph, there's a little bit of guardrail here, and I don't know what this width is, but if there was a guardrail placed on this side, and if this width was, say, 15 to 20 or 24 feet, then the Caltrans employee can take care of the green space here because there's a guardrail on each side, and then you only have to continue the guardrail until you're at your 32-foot magic number. So I think the concern is how long this pie piece gets. And so if you kind of want to establish a formula that once this becomes more than, say, 75 feet or 100 feet, we've got to come up with another solution. Or once this becomes at least 24 feet, we've got to add a metal guardrail on each side. Taking this all the way to 32 feet, which might be way over here, is just too much. And making this thing, 300 feet worth of paving is just wrong. It just doesn't look good for our community. Because flipping through these photographs, I mean, we've got some, ice plant is beautiful. It's got a little bit of color. We can save it. I understand what you're doing for for maintenance protection of the employees, but the proposal you have is just is a little too stark, and we should find a compromise. Then going back to solution-wise, I would say that more of the natural color of the stamped concrete, whether it's the split face or the tile, I'm leaning more towards the split face theme because it looks more like Santa Barbara sandstone. The slate looks a little too gray and fake. The execution of it might get a little bit challenging in some locations. So the more natural stone pattern that you can have that's in a buff color, tan color would be more appropriate. So that's the color theme, and then my thoughts of 32 feet is too much, bring that down to say 20 or 24, and add this guardrail so that you can give your employees some protection.
I'm going to agree with previous comments that the kind of setting the parameters to one size fits all probably isn't appropriate, and where you can increase or decrease the amount of landscaping you're removing. I agree with Paul's comments. I think these two are potential items here. My preference is the natural sandstone color, but I do like a border around it. And when considering these new areas, paved areas, I think you need to look closely at the shape. And it isn't necessarily just the planter filled in with concrete. I think the shape needs to conform and work with the shape of the pie shape of the freeway. And this feels arbitrary to me, the way this is cut off. And it doesn't feel like it's set in with this environment. So definitely consider the shape there. Those are my comments.
Tip.
And I do agree with all the comments of all the board members.
Nice and simple. Do you have anything else for us? Do we need to make an official motion, or did you take good notes?
There won't need to be a motion. It's just you're offering comments. It's a courtesy review. And I believe Mr. Lamone wants to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted, for the benefit of the board members who, I don't know if you've dealt with this issue with Caltrans. Caltrans does come to us as a courtesy review. They're a state agency. And when you look at this freeway corridor, the city has limited oversight on portions of it. We have the Coastal Corridor Parkway portion, and some of these improvements are outside. Most of them are outside that area. So the only thing that we have resemblance of a previous approval is the Crosstown Freeway improvement, which involved all the areas of the corridor areas. Mm-hmm. So this is your opportunity to have Caltrans consider your comments in their final design, but ultimately they have a responsibility to make it safe. So they may or may not comply based on safety considerations. So any input on the selection of the paved material would be helpful, I believe.
Is it possible for us to get actual drawings that show these areas with, it's very hard to actually understand these areas being improved. There's no scale, there's no dimensions indicated. Maybe there are scale, but I couldn't.
No scale, but there are dimensions on the length. These are 100-foot lengths.
How do you know
May
that?
I respond?
Yeah, and you get by a mic and point on this one because the TV guys.
Right, yeah, these are, the drawing packet that was provided, it's, approaching the working drawing stage, so we do apologize for that. It's a little technical. We know that you guys have expertise in that area, so we hope that was appropriate. But yeah, there's some scaling. The tick marks you see there, the stationing lines, as we call them, those are 100 feet.
So this is 203/4, so 275 about?
Right, so they're in scale at that.
Correct.
And
To
then this would be
themselves,
32
they're in
feet.
scale, correct.
I think
So, for example, I'm looking on sheet C7, and I see the tick marks here, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. Those are 100 feet. And I don't see any dimension here for the widths, but I'm scaling, it would be something like, looks like it's around 20 feet here, and maybe 10 feet here, something like that.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then each one is similar.
not each one is similar. The dimension, the controlling dimension, I may have misspoke or misguided that information coming across. The controlling distance is from outside white stripe to inside yellow stripe, and that's 32 feet. So not the entire paved area is 32 feet wide. There's an 8-foot area, and then there's a 2-foot or 4-foot, sometimes shoulder on the inside, so there's 12 feet that wouldn't be paved. It could be anywhere from 20 feet all the way to 32 feet, depending on the area. But
Don't mind. I remember when we were doing some other freeway stuff that we had a planter that maybe was 8 feet wide. We had a guardrail on each side. We had landscaping in between. So we had some number of, say, 10 feet or 12 feet. So at some point, we could have a width and have the guy inside and still be protected. And so if we can establish that as your base, and let's just call it a 15-foot width or, 15 feet worth of dirt. And when it's less than 15 feet worth of dirt, then you pave it. But to go with what we're thinking is 32 feet of concrete is just like, whoa. That's a lot of landscaping to lose because we're so used to right now seeing, and also the length. Once this becomes, I don't know what the distance, I mean, more than 100, more than 200 feet, 150 feet, it starts becoming too imposing. And so if there's any way, and so that's how we justify the cost. Once this length becomes more than 150 feet, then we are encouraging you to spend the money on the guardrails over here so that this doesn't look like a 350-foot long, 17-foot wide piece of concrete.
So let me ask, with these comments, what happens now? I mean, do you guys make changes, or do you
Let's ask
say
Jaime.
thanks very much and sayonara? Or
I think we can ask Mr. Beard if he intends to come back with some changes to the plan and present those changes.
Well, the three of us are going to collaborate on how to address some of these changes. There may be possibilities to make adjustments based on what you told us.
Okay.
And then at that point, I can communicate further with Mr. Limon about we'll be doing in response to the comments we've received and see where we go from there.
All right.
Also, I would like to get a little sense of the feelings of the committee as to whether the entrances and exits from the primary corridors into the old city would be treated differently than other entrances and off ramps and so forth. And if so, which material would be of their primary choice?
If
preference?
people want to just go down the line and tell us what your thoughts are based upon Howard's request. You understand what he's saying?
Mm-hmm. I do, and I definitely think that traffic is heavier in the downtown corridor than it is in the rural parts of outer Goleta, and thus those are safer areas, so you don't necessarily need such huge, long areas of safety. And it would be more in keeping with the rural environment of those locations to keep them more natural. I agree with the other board members' selections of the colors, and
Chair.
Tip and then Kurt.
I think that they heard us loud and clear on what we like to see, and I let them go back and let them come back with let's have one solution for a stretch of freeway. Let's not complicate things by having different solutions for different sections of the freeway, and they that we don't want a lot of paving, we want more landscaping, and you know what we want with the colors. So just if you can come back with another presentation, that'll be really appreciated.
Okay, Kurt.
I would just say, in my view, the buff earth tone color that resembles more like a DG surface and is still very visible, I think that would be my first choice in terms of color. And then, I agree with Howard, if we couldn't get enhancements or reduction in the concrete areas and planting improvements instead, if we can't get it in all cases, that if we could pick the most conspicuous spots like the entrance to the old city areas, that would be great. But I think it's something that really needs to be studied, and so thanks for your presentation.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I know you guys are Caltrans and basically you do what you want, but I'm hoping we can get a commitment from you today that you'll come back and see us one more time.
You don't have to answer that. I'll ask. My comment is that the one-size-fits-all for the Santa Barbara to come up with kind of a formula that you lay out, and you don't have to treat the entrances any different with a different paving pattern. The only... How'd I go off? I don't know. Oh, that's why I went off. But what I would say is that the main entrances is to shorten the amount of concrete, and that means to spend the money on the guardrails, because you know which entrances are important, and to have a 350-foot or 250-foot concrete, you know what it's going to look like over time, and those that are heavily traveled exits and entrances should be diminished, and spend the money on the guardrails, which protects the employees and gives us that landscaping.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you have to know that, I mean, we're Caltrans employees, I have to appreciate what you're saying, but we share all the things that you had mentioned today. I think we're all here for safety, and your companies are, and our company is, and all that stuff. So that said, in terms of your aesthetic sensitivities, guaranteed, we appreciate and agree with the things you're talking about. And looking at the context, looking at the Santa Barbara corridor, we're very well aware of the guidelines and all that sort of thing. So know that. And one of our goals coming in here already with what we've seen, I guess, at varying degrees of successful communication, is it does still represent trying to minimize vegetation removal and some of those sort of things. So we will still go back and see what else we can do, but we kind of do need a little bit of a reality check here, and that is that this is a much bigger picture than us folks and your neighborhood Caltrans office at District 5. And it's a statewide program in terms of safety and some of these standards. Now there's latitude, and we can try and find those where we can. And just for example, the guardrail issue, we agree that isn't always a solution because that is considered a fixed object. And so to hit a guardrail can be equally an injurious thing to the traveling public if not in the right location. So that we'd love to be able to do that as a solution. And it's a great idea, but we would never be able to do that in most situations. There are ones where it does. We'll go back and look at some of those things again. And we will, just how can we keep it green? How can the goals that we heard from you guys today? So we appreciate that, whether we come back with another presentation or not. And thanks for the invite. That'll be up to Dave and up management will just determine if they care to do that. We got from you the treatments, if we have to do these, if it's a small one or a small area of it or a large area of it. We heard the things about the buff colors, the more natural looking those things. We'll take those. Or what I do isn't I heard a little conflicting opinion from board members on do we enhance certain gateway, and we heard Garden, Castillo, Carrillo, and I don't know what else. Do you want those as a separate, just something more keeping with historic values of the downtown core, or
I feel that
perhaps one throughout the length? That's a fundamental design thing that would help us even now, no matter how much what else we do. That would be helpful information if the board cares to give us an opinion on a consensus on that.
I think the consensus was that make them small as possible.
Minimize the paving and increase the landscaping, and try to apply to that every location you can do.
Yes, well, and we heard that loud and clear. I'm wondering now. Let's say we've minimized it, and there still is there's a little residual concrete has to happen everywhere, but we've done a really great job of minimizing that. Still, with that, do you want the treatments at some of these downtown core entrances to be different pattern? That's your Spanish tile look, and every place else is a more natural DG appearance. That question, and I don't know if you're prepared to help us with that at all today.
I'll offer you my opinion, and I would rather see everything the same instead of these 3 exits being special, because then you wonder why every third one is a different color of concrete. I would rather see that the more important exits have the diminished landscaping with the extra expense in protecting the employee. That's my personal view.
I concur.
I concur with that.
It works for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't need to make a motion. We're basically done?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
One last thing on a different subject, which is on the Salinas one, and just because you're here, and it has to do with the northbound off-ramp to Salinas. There's a big, huge sign, and there's some landscaping right in front of the sign, and I kind of always wish that the landscaping was on the back side of the sign, because as the landscaping gets larger, it's going to block the letters, and the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to cut that bush away. And we worked really hard to ask you to put the landscaping in that gorge area, and then you put a huge sign there, right? And that was just kind of an odd placement. File that away.
Duly noted, right here.
Anything else? If not, we'll move on to item 2.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Presentation. Very good.
You guys take these with you. Thank you. Okay. You don't want a copy of this?
Item 2 is 4 o'clock. We're basically on time. It is 474 Scenic Drive.
How are you?
You can well, 3 minutes behind, but that's right.
That's pretty good.
That is good. Thank you.
Announce your name for the record, and then we'll get some drawings in front of us.
My name is Jonathan Villegas with Dark Moon Building Design and Engineering.
Okay.
And I'm the designer and structural engineer on this project.
Great.
And I'm Dan Lindsay, the trustee for the Scenic Drive Trust.
Okay.
I'm Suzanne Yates. I'm the property manager.
No, that's like something different.
474 Scenic.
seen this project before. We have minutes, and I'll have Kirk actually go through the minutes, and then we'll have your presentation.
Great.
I don't have them yet. And then also, if the staff hearing officer comments are in there, if you can peruse those as well.
Okay. So I'm looking at the ABR concept review from February 3rd. Does that sound correct?
Yes, that was the last one.
Great. And the motion was continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer to return to the full board with comments. Number one, the board finds the proposed setback modification acceptable and aesthetically appropriate and does not pose consistency issues with the Architectural Board of Review guidelines. Number two, a majority of the board finds acceptable the proposed yellow building color. Number three, add a tile cap on all parapets, including the garage parapet, to match the character of existing tile caps and previous older photographs. Number four, provide a full elevation of the front wall and more closely match the existing curve of the original gate. Number five, provide a landscape plan. Provide fine plantings at the rear elevation of the garages. Number six, add screening for the understory of the rear deck. Number seven, staff to verify if the existing vinyl windows were installed prior to the requirement for city review. Number eight, return with any changes to the existing hardscape on the landscape plan. And that was a 6-0 vote. Tip was absent. And then not seeing anything from staff hearing officer on this.
If you want to just continue with your presentation and then tell us what happened at the staff hearing officer.
Yeah, actually, we did reproduce the documents from the staff hearing officer.
Was there any conditions that they made on the project?
The conditions were part of the archaeological study, and just to make sure that we followed the guidelines for the archaeological study, that was basically it.
Great. So you want to go through your presentation or tell us how you addressed those previous items?
Sure. For the front wall, we did show the full elevation of the front wall, and that is on this sheet here, which more closely matches the existing wall. So we showed these little
whoop-de-whoops.
Yeah, whoop-de-whoops, yeah, whatever they call them. So these pilasters that were kind of extruded, and so we did that.
Okay. What was the tile cap on the buildings?
The tile cap, we've added the tile caps to the existing buildings. We're showing here on the back deck, and we're also saying that that is to be implemented on all the parapets as well.
And then the proposed garage also has it?
Yeah, the proposed garage does have actually on the previous sheet. So we now have the parapets with the tile caps that are on there.
Okay.
We also addressed the landscaping in the rear of the buildings right there. So we're just adding some vines.
Is this 1 foot from the property line?
Yeah, these are 1 foot from the property line. So try to get something that diminishes it. We did have to add part of the stormwater treatment program. We did have to add some rain barrels. And so we're coming down with some copper gutters, and they're going into this rain barrel system. That's a terracotta pot with a planting on top of it.
Okay, and is that shown on the site plan?
Yes, they were shown on the site plan.
Just go there real fast. Here it is on these two, those three.
And actually, probably on the stormwater plan, it's more accurately shown. Right
1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Okay. And how did you address the understory?
The understory is addressed by, we just have stucco underneath there. So it's not open anymore. It's stucco to match the existing cell fabric.
It comes down like this?
It's just flat. So yeah, so it comes down to an existing, a footing that we're going to add there.
I'm sorry, I can't hear this.
We're on page
I see it, but I don't understand what you're saying. It's not enclosed?
It is enclosed. Now it's enclosed. Before it was open. So we do have it now enclosed with the with stucco.
Is this shadowed area? Why is that shadowed area different?
Not sure why shadowed. Shouldn't be shadowed because
Oh,
it should
okay.
be the same plane.
All right.
So
It's all one plane
Yes.
across
All
there.
one
Yeah.
plane. Okay. Was there anything else on the motion? Did we cover all those items?
Was there a landscape plan?
Oh, that's true. Forgot. Is there a landscape plan?
Yes, it's towards the.
Got some details. And let's do it this way. The garage. This is landscaping.
There's the legend for the landscape plan.
And you had some vines over here somewhere.
Yeah, there's 3 vines in the back and 1 on this one. So that's the only change to the rear. That's a new addition. And then what we've basically done is existing grass areas are being deleted, and you see these by the light yellow here. So to accommodate the new footing, the new plot of the garage, this existing grass area is going away, as is this, which is going to be a backup area, as you may recall.
Correct.
from this,
25 feet.
Back in, like that, and so forth. So these areas go away. This area is gained, so this is a new growth area in grass. So existing, what we have is grass here because of the wall where it goes like now to here. So we're going to regain this lost grass. And actually, we're going to move that grass up to here and just refill this.
We're also adding some permeable paving to the entries.
One of the problems with this property is when the rains come, and we all know how the rains are in Santa Barbara, when they come all at once. And when the water starts to drop onto these driveways, they come down here like a sluiceway, and they come crashing down the roadway. With the semi-permeable pavers, we think that'll help slow it down or at least soak some of it in before it goes too much further.
Okay. Good. There was a comment on there having to do with staff verifying the vinyl windows. What was the resolution of that?
They did find out that at the time that the vinyl windows were installed was before the mandate for getting a building permit for these vinyl windows.
Here's the photographs that are actually stamped with the
We have
date
old
on them.
photos from a long time ago that showed them existing.
Okay.
And I showed those to Suzanne and others, so they signed off on that.
Did you want to see those photographs?
I just want to confirm with staff over here. That's all I'm doing. Suzanne?
I can comment on that.
Okay.
The applicant's correct. At one point, the city was not requiring permits for a retrofit of windows. And so we have encountered projects that have changed out their windows prior to that mandate. The fact remains there's no permits on record. So one of the things that the board will have to consider is if they find them acceptable. They are being presented. That also affects the historic integrity of this bungalow court. That's one of the things that our historian pointed out is it really did detract from the original sort of character of the site. So I think at the last concept hearing, the historian was looking at maybe maintaining the streetscape a little bit better. But that remains your directive here, as to whether you choose to ask them to change them back.
So it's within our purview to ask for changes to the windows.
That's correct.
And the reason was because you didn't pull a permit when replacing the windows versus it being required to them to not be vinyl.
Yeah, apparently there wasn't a requirement in those days. So what we've done, which I think is going to meet with your satisfaction to alleviate some of that problem, and you can see it in some of the photos here, and it may not be captured in all of it as well as I'd like.
Can you make sure you're near that microphone? Just pull it on down.
Sorry, guys.
That's fine.
There's a couple of things that are going on. One of the things has been the addition of awnings, which has really softened up that whole business of vinyl windows. In fact, with the awnings there that we're slowly putting in the front area, and I don't know if I have a current awning shot or not, you don't even notice the vinyl per se. I don't know if is it in there? Yeah, there we go. So it kind of changes the nature a little bit of that. We're trying to, wherever there's hardscape, we're trying to soften things up, obviously with the plantings, and also to just try to dress things up a little bit. And we think that kind of helps lessen the impact of the vinyl windows up in the frontage area.
Okay. And was there anything else on the motion?
I think we covered it.
Great. If you have anything else, or I'll open up public comment.
No, just I wanted to mention too that we also are adding the permeable pavings in front of the garages to get rid of some of the hardscape, and it's actually shown on the stormwater plans.
Storm plan.
So.
Okay. Good deal. And take that one out too. All right. With that, I will open up public comment. I got a speaker slip from Kellum DeForest.
Yes.
You want to?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, as head of the Preservation Committee for the Pearl Chase Society, I'm getting letters, emails, and anyway, about the change out to vinyl windows in bungalow courts, especially off-the-shelf white vinyl windows that come from Home Depot. It's very stock, detract greatly from the historic look of bungalow courts, which in bungalow courts there's a somewhat unique concept, mostly found in Southern California, and there are a number here in Santa Barbara, and they should retain they shouldn't look plastic or whatever the bungalow, whatever trim these windows now have, and if they could be made to look more like the original ones would be a help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else from the public? If not, I'll close public comment, return it back to the board for questions of the applicant. Whoever wants to jump in first. Howard.
I have questions. Wasn't clear on what's happening with, says, the legend on this landscape plan says that this dark green area here is called retained grass areas equals net loss of grassy plantings.
Yes.
So is this grass being removed?
Yes, as I mentioned a moment ago, because of the change in the garage orientation in the rear part of the property, we're going to lose some grass, which you see here,
right,
which is the beige or the light yellow. That grass goes up to here to this upper area, just like this area and this area. The actual, when you do the numbers, it's a net zero change in the total grassy area. In fact, there's very minor work involved. There's a couple of sprinkler heads that get relocated, but basically there's not a lot of involvement there.
So this is grass?
That's grass back there.
Okay, what is the paving material down here? Is this existing or is this a new paving?
This is existing, and right in this area, starting from here to roughly about here, it's asphalt.
Right. And then beyond the asphalt, what else?
Concrete.
Okay, so and then coming up the driveway, these two strips here, those are concrete strips?
With a grass mow strip in the center.
Okay, and then on each side of that is planter?
We have, on the house side, we have plantings that are predominantly ice plant.
Okay.
And on the other side, we have, which is, I always forget the name of this stuff.
Tall purple.
Agapanthus?
Agapanthus, that's it.
Those have been there for years.
They've been there for eons. And they're on
the ice plant, trying to plant drought-resistant plants.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Somebody else? Okay.
I have a question. There was, I recall in the last go around there, and there was some mention of the area underneath the stairs that's being enclosed as being, and this is a question for staff, but staff doesn't pay attention.
Suzanne?
Susan.
Yes. Sorry. We have a question for you.
The area underneath the back staircase was enclosed, and there was a question in the last meeting about it being counted as part of the square footage and how that would affect the
Well, there's only one staircase. They've enclosed the back stairs. So if they are over density, they would not be allowed to add any square footage. I don't know if it's over density or not.
That's a question for the applicant, how that was handled with them.
Yeah, actually, we're basically replacing the existing deck as it is right now. And underneath the deck is, I think, less than like 5 feet of
Garden
headroom.
tools and things like that.
So it's,
I'm understanding it's about this high.
You can't stand up.
it's basically a crawl space.
You have to,
area
yeah, it's
underneath
basically
it.
like a crawl space.
It's all, so it's all stucco, and there's some sort of board, and then some posts
Yeah,
that are
wood posts.
proud of the stucco?
Yeah, actually, that stair actually goes ahead of it to pull it away from the laundry room, because there's a laundry room stair that goes down into the area in front of it. So we had to actually pull that stair away from it.
I see that in plan.
So the note that says underside of deck closed with stucco wall to match existing, at points, you mean this, all 3 of these now?
Yeah, so it's all, you're just seeing the shadow from the stair that's protruding in front of it, right
So
there.
actually, the space under the stair is not enclosed.
Right, that one was open.
Basically, the space that's in the same plane as this wall right here.
Correct.
So we would not see a line there, but above, we would see a line because this is recessed.
Right.
This is in the same plane.
Correct.
And this plane and this plane and this plane are all in the same plane.
Let me
And
just
that
double
is
check.
actually recessed.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, we talked about this earlier, I just want to make sure I'm.
There might be a little bit of a reveal, that might be why you're seeing that line there.
Well, I think we're going to be more than a reveal, because you've got people walking behind there. How do you get, for example, here, do we have a plan of that rear deck somewhere?
On the site plan, there's a plan.
Sheet
So-
A 0.3.
When you show double crosshatched area there, what does that mean?
That's the deck?
Yeah, part of it's the existing deck that's being replaced.
Yes.
So the crosshatch area.
Right.
And then the darker lines, the solid lines, are actually the new deck.
Right.
That's going to be installed there. And as you can see, there's the stair that's pulled away from the existing
see.
deck, because the existing deck was kind of conflicting with the existing stairway that was going down into the
Okay.
laundry room.
Okay.
And by doing that too, we're also helping the water that gets pushed into the laundry room.
So then this area here
So
is where the
let's show it on the screen.
wall,
Howard.
stucco wall steps back.
Correct.
So this is,
Right over here?
so this is your stucco wall back here?
Yes.
And this is all open underneath?
That's open right there.
Under the stairs.
Yes.
Suzanne Riegel had checked that, and it is fine. And I looked at the plan before I left the room to go ask her. If it's not floor area, then it's okay. And if that is not floor area.
Okay. Yeah, and we understand it now, what's being proposed. I also saw in the last meeting, there was a small, very slight distinction in, that the board pointed out on the, can you put this in the front of the camera? On the swoop of the radius of
This
that.
radius,
It's not a full radius.
The
it's
wall detail?
Yeah, and the wall.
more of an elliptical or a very
It's not a
elongated?
full. It's not a full radius that you've shown. Is this what you're proposing, or was your intention to mimic the existing?
The intention was to mimic the existing, and maybe I just need to put a note on the wall to make sure that whoever constructs it does actually mimic the radiuses that are there.
That was a good call, good catch.
And is all the permeable paving that you're proposing at the two front driveway aprons and the backup area for the garages the same?
Yes, and actually there's some existing permeable paving that's on site that we're matching. So-
Okay, as in here.
Exactly.
All right. I think that's it for my question.
Do you have any
My
other?
turn?
Yes.
So I see the one drawing that shows the tile cap on the parapet. Are you replacing all the sheet metal caps with tile caps?
Yes.
The word says throughout.
Throughout,
yes.
Excellent. That's it. That's the only question I have.
Okay. I have no questions.
No questions.
And then let's wrap this up for a motion. It's here for project design approval, and then we can also give it final if you think it's ready, or return it to consent for final with any additional comments. And then something we need to discuss as a board is whether or not we want to see the front windows replaced, or the front building's windows replaced, or if we have a problem with all of the windows being replaced without a building permit.
I'll go ahead and chime in because I've been waiting to comment on that issue. This is such a cute little bungalow arrangement. 5 units. It's been there for, I don't know, 100 years, maybe?
Since 27.
27?
Yeah.
Okay.
80 years, probably.
And as rentals, so there's been a lot of income generated by it, and now you're making some improvements that also require a modification. I think that it is appropriate that we use this nexus to restore it to some of its original beauty. And I just, as was commented earlier, these vinyl windows, Home Depot or wherever, that are the least expensive retrofit that you can do. They cover over the edges of the plaster. You don't even have to disturb the inside necessarily. You can do it very quick and easily. They just are a real detriment to this project. And so, in my view, I would say, all the windows that are visible from the street. You have that all interior court, which, that's fine. You want to keep those the way they are. But I would say, not just the ones facing the street, but the ones that are visible from the street should be replaced. The other thing I have a problem with is the white gutters, because with the white vinyl windows, those white gutters and downspouts look like they're plastic as well. So I would ask that the gutters and downspouts be painted a traditional color, and that would be either something that would imitate copper, like a deep greenish brown, or you could match the brown on the posts. The other thing is I think the landscaping needs more attention. We asked for a landscape plan, and typically you show existing landscaping as well as what's being proposed, and all we have is just some very broad indication of where there are plantings and where some new plantings might go. But if you look at
I can actually save you on one aspect, because this has 5 units. We can require a licensed landscape architect to do the plans. I don't think a structural engineer can do a landscape plan.
No, I didn't see these plans.
Okay, well, so I'm just looking at, for example, this photograph, which shows, long lengths of the existing yard that have very little planting, and it looks just like dirt with a few small plantings.
Can I take a peek at that?
Okay, I realize it's all different, but we don't have any indication of what's actually there now, either in plan or in photographs.
It's
So
beautiful. Everyone in the neighborhood.
if it is, then we just need some evidence. I just
Okay.
don't. I was looking through all the
I can take some
photographs.
photos.
Right. This is I keep seeing photos of the front,
Okay.
which is pretty nice. But here's my comment about the front. I think there's some enhancement that can go on here as well. These meters, I think, need to be screened from the street, just with a shrub or something. I think that would really help that front building. But anyway, we need a plan or evidence. If it's in photographs and it's clear where the plantings are, then we can say, yes, this is fine. But
This is a.
currently, I don't see it.
Let's just move forward with this. Okay.
Those are my comments.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Anyone else?
I thought that was a motion.
No, we're at comments. We're a little bit behind, but let's just wrap this up and move forward.
I agree with those comments, and my opinion is that I don't think you can take the replacement of the vinyl windows with wood sash windows too far. I think it really should, the more you do that, the better it is for this project. Secondly, I just, from my questions, gather that there's just a lot of materials on the ground with pavers and concrete and landing strips and asphalt and changing over to concrete and so forth. It would be really nice if you could somehow unify the project by some sort of surfacing material that would be permeable and that would unify the project in terms of its the vehicular flow on the project and not be quite such a potchky mix of things. And I definitely agree with the screening of the meters and the other comments.
Comments from somebody else?
Yep. Well, I do agree with the previous comments, especially about the windows and the rain girders. So.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the windows. Just so that we're clear, to replace the windows visible from the street, that's pretty much every window in the project. I mean, it's not just the windows.
No, it's not, because you have this interior court. You have this whole interior court.
Fully visible from the street.
You can see almost every window from the
Well, I think
street.
that's debatable. But you
drive by.
To my eye, if you're replacing these in the front, it wants to turn the corner, and then where do you stop? You're kind of at least all the way through the courtyard.
I lived there for many years. You can see all the windows except the ones in the back by the garages when you drive by.
Replace them all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they were put in before many years ago. I mean, if anybody wants to make donations, that'd be
Let's
great.
go on.
And this is expensive.
The question I want to ask for staff is just to verify that what the project we're looking at is really the garages, because that's where we started from. And the landscape plan has to do with the construction for the garages and for the alterations for the front wall. And so it's the landscaping in these two zones really that we're concerned with, because that's where construction's happening. So we're not in a position to ask for any type of landscaping in this middle court area because they're not really touching anything here. Now, they did do some alterations without a building permit, and that's a secondary issue. But the landscaping in here is existing, and we can tell from previous photographs that they had a house of a certain caliber, and they've done some work to it. So I wanted to verify with staff that that was a correct assumption. That
Yes.
We're not in a position of saying, provide us a landscape plan
I
for the
was just
entire
about
parcel.
to comment on that. It is an enforcement case, primarily dealing with the parking situation, the garages. And as-built painting of the building, it was painted a bright yellow, and the windows alterations, which are debatable about when they occurred. The focus should be, if you're going to ask for additional landscaping information, is where it's being altered. So you're correct. It'd be unfair to say, give us a complete accounting of all the existing landscape on the site. That should not be your focus.
So I've got one last question for you, and then I want to go back to the board on something having to do with the windows. A permit would have been required to replace the windows, and they chose.
Let me clarify that. At about right shortly thereafter, the demolition review ordinance was adopted. It was very clear that the Building and Safety Division was not always triggering permits for window alterations. And that was actually being caught with what we call partial demolition. We were trying to prevent buildings from being stuccoed that were historic and building alterations that eliminated character-defining elements. And we consider these wood windows to be character-defining elements. So about 2004 is where we had the Building and Safety Division actually alert local window contractors that a permit is required for retrofits. So if you didn't break the plaster, some contractors felt that that didn't need an inspection. And some of the building officials at the time were even saying that. There's no need to, that we made them realize that we couldn't enforce the demo review ordinance without this provision in effect. So that's when it happened. So if you don't see a building permit on record, it's difficult for us to ascertain how long those windows have been there.
But they, based upon their photographs, they're determining that they did the windows before 2004.
That's what they're indicating. Now, there is a nexus sometimes when you alter a building to look at those alterations and say, are they appropriate? it's a harder challenge when you tell somebody they have to expend a lot of money to take away improvements.
So this is the thing to the board, so you understand, we have a choice of either requiring them to replace the windows, they can appeal us to the city council, and we take it to the city council and we actually present the situation, and they have to make the decision, or we can accept the vinyl windows, as terrible as they are and how wrong it was to do it, because the process involved in getting them to replace it might not be successful. Or do we want to put forth the energy in seeing that this building and its character-defining elements are restored?
Mr. Chair, I think the vinyl windows are not an enhancement, but I think the water is muddy enough at this point that I have a hard time requesting that of the applicant. I don't know how others feel.
I can go the same way.
I personally feel the same way, and I would hate to see the other improvements not completed because of this. If we were to go with some modified motion about just the street-facing ones, then maybe there's just 4 on the street frontage, and those would be 4 windows. That's not as huge a burden as every single window on this property, but I think that that is too huge a burden to place on this project.
Anyone else want to chime in?
I am an all-or-nothing type person, so I would say nothing.
I would say not to bother with the ones facing the windows, because once they were all done, it would look silly to have these 3 one way and the other ones.
I agree.
Unless you could mitigate it with landscaping and never see those ugly ones in the back.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'll just, since I started this mess. First of all, I wasn't expecting a landscape plan that showed everything on the site. I was in the areas where the work is being done. I think it is appropriate, and there is evidence that, there's some spots that affect the public along the driveways that are being enhanced, that additional planting could be added, some screening and so on.
And the windows?
And I think the windows are really unfortunate, and I don't think replacing 4 of them is going to help the project.
So let's wrap
I'll
this
go
up.
with what the rest of the board wants to do.
Let's wrap this up with a motion of giving the project design approval, returning it to the consent with the following items.
Go ahead.
And I'll craft a motion if someone wants to take a look at it. One of them is that the applicant, the board finds the replacement of the windows to be disappointing and disheartening, but sees that it's too big of a burden on the applicant to replace all the windows, to return it back to its historical charm, and still keeping the project in a moderate income rent district. The board would like to see the existing white vinyl gutters and downspouts to be painted a traditional color, and that the applicant is to provide a color board showing the existing plaster color and all the colors on the project for the color board for the record. On the landscape plan, the applicant is to return with a professionally landscape plan of the areas in which there is work, which is around the garages and at the front retaining walls. And one thing, I'm just on a side note, it needs to be clearly noted what this vine is, and if there's 1 here, and if there's 2 or 3 over here, and what the type is, gallon size, and irrigation plan. That kind of information is missing. And whatever's happening in the parkway, you're removing 2 trees, replacing it with 4 trees. Additional information, and I would encourage a licensed landscape architect to prepare a plan. Irrigation plan would be necessary for areas where there is new landscaping, and then the city has some standard form for the irrigation compliance statement. And that the applicant is to provide construction detail information about the curved wall, and it should resemble the wall that's being relocated, which is more an elliptical curve versus a true radius. So with that, it's a project design approval with indefinite return to consent with those items. Someone wanting to make that motion?
I do that.
Howard?
I'll make that, and I'd like to add one thing.
Let's add, who wants to second it? Stephanie, Howard, you're up.
I'd like to add that the applicant bring a detail of the parapet cap that shows corners and ends and actually works out which way the direction of lap and cover on those tiles. It's tricky, and it needs to be worked out. Otherwise, there's no one knows.
And also, if the maker of the motion would agree to Howard's suggestion that the applicant look at adding more permeable paving where possible, just in front of the new garages, match the existing permeable paving on the project.
It's absolutely okay with me.
Okay, so it was actually just a suggestion that the applicant look at adding more permeable paving. It wasn't a directive. So consider that and how it's going to work, because when you bust out all this stuff, you're going to have a lot of, ruined asphalt because of the construction equipment. Before you know it, you might as well just replace
Actually,
this.
ruined concrete. But no, I agree completely with that.
Yeah.
There's only one real problem with all of that.
Yeah,
there's no money for that.
Yeah, no, we look at,
We
because
could work at that later, and the windows even maybe,
Yeah.
unless it would, I don't know, changing the windows, that would compromise the
we're not there at the
structure.
windows anymore.
Okay.
The comment had to do about permeable pavers, because we understand that during the course of construction, a lot of this area
Right.
gets annihilated.
Oh, of course.
So we're encouraging you to, maybe make this rectangle here and this rectangle here, or however you want to do it.
Yeah,
but
I'd love
that's-
to, because I plan not to do anything to that until that's done, because I know it's hard on this stuff.
So let's move
But
forward.
the only other issue I've got to bring up, and you asked for a licensed landscape engineer to do this. I have no money in the budget for a $2,000 landscape person to put in a few sprinkler heads and design where a plant's going to go, because the last engineer that wanted to do this project wanted to charge me $2,000 to do that. I don't have the money in the budget to spend on somebody who's going to put together a little plan and put little plants on it, that sort of thing.
The position I'll take as the board member, the city has a requirement when you have so many units that you have to have licensed professionals. You're a structural engineer, you can take care of the buildings, but there's certain things that are outside of his purview. Landscape architecture is out of my purview.
Yeah.
You're doing street trees, you got to work with the city on what type of variety and what's the size of it. I'm not going to go there because I can't read whatever language they write that in.
Yeah.
So someone has to do it intelligently, and we have a licensed landscape architect who's going to review it on consent, and if this doesn't cut the mustard, you're going to be back again. So if you want to keep on churning through the system,
I'm just saying, we don't have the money.
it's not that issue. It's the way the rules are written.
No,
If
I
you have
understand
more than so many units,
Then the program is probably dead.
okay,
Yeah.
we created a motion, we have a request. Anything else? All right, with that, let's call for a vote. And this is an indefinite continuance in this project design approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. And I will announce a 10-day appeal period. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
So this is the project design
Mr.
approval.
Chair?
Project design approval returning back to consent
Consent with details.
with all those items that were mentioned.
Mr. Chair, we just would like, for the record, the reason for Board Member Gradin's no vote.
Opposition.
Because I think the windows should be replaced.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, we are 15
That's
minutes late, but
extra.
sorry about that. Move on.
Oops.
They took them all.
Or did they take them?
No, they have them.
Were they our pictures or theirs?
We need
Check
those.
with Jaime. Welcome. We are on item 3, which is 2720 Delavina Street. Unroll your drawings, and we'll get the minutes from the previous project. The minutes from the previous meeting.
This project once before. Thank you.
Another color on there.
Are they any different than what we're looking at?
Exactly the same.
Okay. I need the minutes, Tony. Do you have them?
Yes.
You want to introduce yourself?
Mark Kirkhart, Principal Design Architects, Project Architects.
Melissa Sinarli Turner, project manager, also for Design Arc.
And I'm Bill Miller. I'm the owner of the property.
So with this, we heard this project on March 14th. Does that sound reasonable?
All right.
And we only had 2 comments. The board generally finds the project acceptable in terms of architectural style. And 2, applicant is to restudy proposed colors, textures, and materials, and patinas. All right, Gradine and Chung were absent. That's right.
There was another comment that you made about
I saw that you
massing.
did something there.
Yeah. I thought there was, maybe there's some other things that didn't get written down, but there was another comment about looking at the massing and making it a little more playful or whatever.
Issues in the front yard as well? Issues in the front yard as well as you were conforming with the master plan?
Yes, which we've addressed.
Those are the only 2 comments.
You've only been here once, right?
Yes.
All right, so what's your presentation?
Well, I'll try to fill in a few of the other missing holes that I think we talked about during the meeting, but maybe didn't make it into the minutes. The first one being the issue of the working with the city transportation. I don't know, Tony, do you want to talk about that? How the front yard setback, how we're meeting everything. This is kind of an enlarged plan to show what we resolved. In working with them, we basically were able to provide street trees, 2 street trees within tree grates, and then have an additional 3'6" dedication, and then provide the 10-foot setback that would be required. So we essentially at this point we meet everything that transportation has looked for the long-term master plan. If you recall, before we had the sidewalk narrower, and we were proposing to keep the sidewalk at the curb as it is all the way up and down De La Vina Street. And then this is sort of what we negotiated with them, is essentially doing that, but having the additional width of sidewalk behind the street trees, and giving the 10-foot setback from that new sidewalk, basically 10-foot sidewalk easement. And as far as we understand, transportation is happy with this. So we were able to then still maintain our handicap ramp access and steps here. We've shown all the site visibility lines and so forth. So everything is, everything is on board in terms of the requirements along the front.
Before you go on, Tony, do you want to just confirm that that's correct, those statements?
That's right. Yeah, they're showing compliance with the transportation planning's comments, especially regarding the pedestrian master plan.
Okay.
While I'm at it, there's one note that I added on the agenda that's not quite correct. This won't need development plan approval because they're demolishing about 4,000 square feet and building back about 3,000 square feet of non-residential. So actually they'll have a credit of some non-residential floor area.
So they can sell that to somebody else. All right.
Yeah. Okay. So as you had seen before, really the way this works is we have access to the commercial parking from De La Vina Street, which is actually dropping down with a ramp, and then we have a lobby with a half-level, 3/4 level elevator and stair access to get into the commercial space, and then the upper parking lot takes access off of, excuse me, this is one going down, off of an easement coming across the rear property, which we show here, to the residential parking, which is then up. So these 2 parking levels are one stacked right on top of each other. And then we have a podium on top of that, and a total of our 2, 4, 6, 7 residential units. What we did in an effort to change up the massing was, before we had a pair of twin townhouses facing De La Vina Street, and we were proposing one flat at the back of the property. The client's, our client's owners, the owner's mother is proposing to live in one of these units, so we wanted to have at least one flat. So what we've done is we've moved the flat to the front and put the pair of townhouses in the back of the property that can take advantage of the view. And what that does, I think it shows very well in the first page, is it tends to, we think it's actually quite an improvement in terms of mitigating the way the massing steps up from the one-story element here, kind of goes up to it's really two-story because it's just a single-story residence on top of the commercial, and then it goes to the two-story townhouse. So before it was kind of a matched pair here, which we think is actually kind of a lot more playful and a little more undulating massing. Once again, the idea is this is proposed to be a more, slightly more rustic in terms of the treatment of the finishes. As we mentioned before, all the exterior corners will be bullnosed. Windows will be deeply reset. We'll have some, resawn wood trellises. So it's intended to be, not to be a very real kind of stark modernism, but much more kind of toned down and more approachable. Other than that, the plan is pretty much as you had seen before. The units are about a little over 905 square foot average, so they're very, very modest units. 2-bedroom townhouses and the 2-bedroom flat. So we have elevations and sections. So this would be the west elevation on De La Vina Street, with the driveway throat going down. All the side elevations and rear elevations. The sections, which pretty clearly explain how the parking works. And this one here, where the parking goes down about 2/3 or 3/4 level from De La Vina Street, and then comes in almost at grade from the back for the 2 stacked levels of parking. And then here's your 2 levels of residential units on top. Very generous exterior living spaces on all of these. We have a lot of room kind of up on that balcony, so we're trying to make them much nicer amount of outdoor space. These are the street views.
Great, good presentation. Anything else?
That's it.
Do you have a color board or color materials?
No, we'd come back, we'll bring that back in progress forward.
Okay. So with that, I'll open up public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to address the board? Oh, I'm sorry, Callum DeForest.
Yes. Sorry I missed the initial presentation of this project. I spotted it, and I wanted to point out that the structure that is to be demolished is the former Safeway Market building that dates back to, I don't know if you've got any kind of historical report, it dates back to 1927 when the recently founded Safeway Company built a hangar-like grocery store on what was then Hollister Avenue. It was almost double the size of the conventional market of the day. There was a produce department, a grocery, and a bakery, and it's reputed to be the first supermarket in Santa Barbara. And it differed from the traditional grocery store. It was cash and carry, no credit. The customers picked out their own groceries and produce items, because prior to that time, the custom was that the grocer would deal out the grocery items from the back of the store. I agree the front facade has been changed numerous times, and I'm very sad to see this building go. I remember when it was completely open, the front was completely open with cartons of oranges, apples, lettuce on display. And it certainly is, the rest is about the same. I'm concerned about the size, bulk, and scale of this mixed-use structure. It seems in a streetscape that contains one-story buildings, it's going to stand out and block views. think neighborhood compatibility is one of your issues. I don't know whether this architecture fits the area. It looks a little boxy to me. And I'm also concerned, though that's probably not your purview, if they have to dig down to the parking lot to provide underground parking. This, I thought, was in the Mission Creek floodplain, and they were going to have often they will have a lake in the parking garage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to address the board? If not, does staff have any comments? Nicole, you're here. Are you here just to say hi?
I did want to just address
Your name
Kellam's
for the record?
concern. Nicole Hernandez, urban historian. I just wanted to address Kellam's concern about no historic structure report being done on this structure. Under the demo review ordinance, I review the projects to see if they have enough. We call it historic integrity, which is the ability to convey its original appearance. And if I'm fairly certain that it no longer would meet any criteria to qualify as a historic resource, we don't put the burden on the owner to have a historic structures report. This building, we found, because of its alterations and the surrounding context being altered, it does no longer convey its was built in 1924. It no longer conveys that 1924 appearance. So we have to look at it as is today. I mean, if someone were to go and restore it, it could be restored back, but we can't do that. We look at it as it is today, and it no longer qualifies to ever meet our criteria to be a structure of merit.
Okay.
So that's why we make that judgment call. Hard ones to make, actually.
Okay.
Would you like me to respond to the
I have
floodplain
one
issues?
that was a question I was going to ask staff. Archaeological report, if that's in the zone in the floodplain because of the digging of the garage.
Well, it's one thing I wanted to mention to you, that we have not yet done environmental assessment.
So we
I
can't give
ran a report today, and it showed that we may be asking for an archaeological study, and that it could have flood issues to be reviewed, most likely by building and safety. But
So
we
this is
haven't
going to be
done
comments
the-
only. Comments only today
That's right.
because environmental hasn't been finished.
That's right, and that's why, yeah.
So why don't you start by finishing off that question if you have anything else to add about flood control issues?
We are,
and
yeah. It is in the Mission Creek floodplain, and so the plan is we will be installing the required flood-proofing barriers. They'll be minimized on the commercial space because of the raised planter that we have here, but there will be floodplain barriers, or flood barriers at those front gates and as well as at the driveway entrance. And then so we'll be keeping water out of the lower garage. We're also then putting all of the services on the upper level utilities on the upper level garage, so that they'll be out of the floodplain, as well all the residential is completely out of the floodplain.
Okay.
So we're aware of that issue, and we've designed to deal with it.
Okay. So this is for comments only. Any questions from the board members for the applicant? Howard, you're up.
So the stucco is, the exterior finish is stucco?
Yes, plaster.
Smooth trowel finish with bullnose raised corners?
That's correct.
And the window sash material is what?
Probably wood material. Maybe for sure the interior will be wood. We may do a metal clad. We haven't really made that decision yet. But it'll be a wood
you're not
color.
going to use vinyl windows?
It will not be white vinyl windows. It will not be vinyl windows.
Doors, windows?
Will not be vinyl.
Questions from anybody else?
Yeah.
Stephanie, and then we'll go to Kirk.
I just have a question about something I'm looking at on these are better pictures. Oh, I'm looking at this. Is this white box on top of this sleep shop building?
Yes.
And
Yes,
can
I
you
think
tell
it's
me
a-
how tall that is?
Exactly how tall it is?
I didn't know if you knew how tall
It's
that
good
is.
22 to 20-something feet, because the
front of the building itself has got to be 18 to 20 feet, and that box sits on top of it.
Okay.
It's a
And that
mechanical
helps
screen to start
based on the sections that you drew. You have a 20-foot line, I noticed, on your sections.
Can I go back to that comment? You have a line drawn at 20-some feet on the sections. Where did you see that?
It's not on one of them. Maybe I was looking at the 25.8.
That's the 45-foot height of it there.
25.8.
Here at 3710 is your top.
Yeah,
45 foot, okay. I'm just trying to compare heights and views also, but as that step up that you've made is nice. One quick question, I guess you have to do that extra little sidewalk in front because you have to have circulation on the property? Like, is this not redundant? Can someone park their bike and come out here and
We
come
thought it was
in?
redundant, but that's just the way it is for the.
We were asked to do it.
Okay.
The second, what you're looking at is actually the ramp. The second one is
This is a ramp?
Yeah, that's a
Oh,
ramp.
okay.
And there are steps here
Yeah,
that are not
they're
shown.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 steps there.
Okay.
Okay.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to the comment that the overall height of the building is at 3710 feet.
That's right.
And that's measured from the sidewalk. Okay. Anything else?
I'm looking at the, let's see which floor plan it is. I think it's the second, plan level 2.
Can you tell me what sheet number, just so we're on the same? 100?
100.
Okay.
The distance between the townhome in the middle, central one, and
This
the
space?
2 in the back, yeah, that space, what is that distance there?
It's probably about 8 to 10 feet.
Okay,
That provides, you can see that provides access to
the mechanical.
the mechanical.
Okay.
And it's really just kind of the front entry of that one unit, and their windows are going to be wrapping around the corner on the back two sides for
Yeah.
their private deck.
Right. I was just looking to see if there was any way to push this back, any farther.
Increase the width between those two buildings?
Decrease the width between the two buildings to increase the setback off of Delavina Street of the second level.
So we're already, the building is, you can see where the face of the building is already back, 20 feet from the existing curb. And then we've got another 8 or 10 foot deck, so we're like, 28 feet back to the face of the 3-story portion. So we feel it's really stepped way back compared to where the other buildings are adjacent.
Have you considered you were talking about the bullnose texture, but it's a smooth texture. It's not a rough kind of older style
It'd be slightly undulating.
Undulating, or like an El Paseo kind of plaster look.
Slightly undulating, probably integral color, so it's mottled. It's not necessarily painted. So it's more, slightly more rustic looking. But we don't want to have it be, too much texture. Light texture.
Okay, all right. And
No cottage cheese. No cottage cheese.
Okay.
No Spanish lace.
Right. That's it for my questions.
No heavy dash.
Kirk, and then we'll go to the other side.
I appreciate the way you've modulated the massing and the stepping and added more playfulness in the front. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about neighborhood compatibility in terms of the 3-story element. Where is the nearest 3-story building, or how do you think this fits into the neighborhood in terms of massing?
Well, I think because the major kind of horizontal line here that's just slightly taller than the adjacent structures is going to continue the kind of the datum that you see as you're driving along the street. And this is an up and coming neighborhood. There's been a big remodel up the street. That's the surgery center for the orthopedic surgeons or whatever. That's not 3 stories, but it's a very tall 2-story building, extremely tall 2-story building.
How far is that?
No, it's a few.
Peter Allen did that project, has the blue wall on it.
It's up just before you get to the.
2 doors down from our office.
2 doors down from our office, probably about a block up towards our office. Yeah, I mean the honest truth is there are not many three-story buildings in the neighborhood that I know of. There are some around on State Street. If you go around just down from where the kind of read this thing upside down here, but if you go down from where the CVS store is there, right in that very next block at Cali Crespus, there's a three-story apartment building right on State Street. So it's not like it's without precedent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the undulation of the massing makes it totally appropriate as far as a three-story building, partial three-story building.
And then could you just briefly go over the plate heights that we have proposed?
Sections.
Yeah, we're looking at sections.
Right here. 8,300.
Let's go with the street. You've got commercial, and then you have 2 residential.
Yeah, so we have about 15 feet from the street to the top of the podium. So by the time you include structure and so forth, that's enough to get us a reasonable height in the commercial space, which I don't think is out of proportion.
Which is actually less than there is now.
Yeah, less than the height of the existing building now. And then I think we've got 9-foot
ceilings
in the two residential levels. And there is no 2-story spaces. You know, they're basically just a simple straight stacked flat. And a bit of a parapet, just enough to handle the roof slope.
May I ask a question?
We're actually going this direction, and you can come back.
I'm done. Thanks.
Tip or Scott? Tip.
Are these the proposed colors?
We're talking about warm colors, natural colors, taupey, buffs, beiges. You know, we'll come back.
Not gray.
Not the gray that we see on this. It looks like concrete.
We might have a little bit of gray on there. Yeah.
Okay.
We like gray. It'll be a warm gray.
No gray. No gray. We'll arm wrestle over the gray.
No gray.
We already talked about that.
I think we did.
Yeah. We also asked about Santa Barbara sandstone.
Definitely sandstone.
Anything?
I have 2 questions. I'm sitting, number one, I'm trying to get you to the idea of bull-nose corners in a modern building. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how well we'll go with a modern building, so that's one thing I'm still struggling with. Why bull-nose corners if you go this direction? That's question number one. Question number 2 had to do with, these rendering really help because it give good pictures of what the project might look like at the end. And I'm just still struggling with 3-story massing facing De Laguna, which get to the third question about the plate height. The second floor plate is, the way I see it, is 12 feet 2 inches from the finished floor to the top of the parapet. And seems to me 12.2 is that means, let's say even you subtract 2 feet for framing and parapet, you mean the second floor, that means it's 10 feet high, plate height.
He actually said 9-foot plate.
9 foot.
Correct.
9-foot ceiling.
9-foot ceiling, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so you're going to have 10 and a half. You know, I don't know how you're getting to that number, but
Well, because if you look at 25, at one of the sections here, the top section, you have a 25.8 to the finished floor, and then 37.10 to the top of the roof. That's 12.2, and you minus 2 for the framing and everything else to get you down to 10 feet.
then you got to how much have you added for the parapet? We can debate the amount.
I'm counting about 2 feet total for the parapet. I'm just talking about the height because if you have definitely you should be more than 8. I think 9 is great, and I'm just looking if the massing is low tall, but find a way to bring down a little bit without affecting the quality of the spaces, the interior spaces.
Yeah. We're looking at 9-foot clear ceiling heights, and we'll figure out what the structure is, and put a minimum parapet to handle the slope of the roof. We're not trying to make it look any taller than we have to. We're not. We may perhaps the math is off a little bit, but so when we come back, we can confirm that. But I don't think we should have to be less than 9 feet. 9-foot ceilings.
No, I agree. I think 9 feet should be the right height if you do a third floor. If the third floor is the right concept, just the way, especially from the front rendering. mean, yeah, it's just a simple question I have. And then back to the question about the bull nose. Is there something that the owners like to have bull nose? That's why you're proposing bull nose? I know you don't love bull nose on your block.
Actually, have you ever seen the two duplexes that I built down in the Funk Zone? The side-by-side units on Gray Avenue?
Yeah, I didn't see
That's exactly the inspiration. Those are bull-nosed corners, very modernist buildings, but they're very soft. They're much softer. They're not kind of hard-edged, crisp corners. So I think it's more approachable, warm modernism. I think I like the idea of, and it's been very successful. We've done that before. So that's kind of why we're doing that. That's actually the owner. It's Bill's. Attitude was he likes the modernism, but he'd like it to be more approachable, warmer. Maybe even like the front doors on these buildings might be big wood plank doors, as opposed to something modern, more crisp aluminum doors or something. So that's kind of the whole thing. That's why we put the Reson trellis on the front of it. That's going to have vines growing on it. So I think it's going to be very successful as a warm modern.
I have a question that has to do with this, what is being called a proposed access easement. It's on someone else's property, and the question I really have is for staff and what our involvement is. What's the width of the paved surface, and what's the landscaping on each side, and what's our role in encouraging additional landscaping and planting in this area, and how it's being developed? Because right now we don't see it. Or how do you answer it, and then what can we ask you to do for it?
Well, this is an existing easement. The part that's crosshatched here is the existing easement that he has, and we're now in discussions with the homeowners association of the condos to basically get it to align with the existing driveway as opposed to right to the property line, because this is fully hedged and screened here, existing landscape along this whole driveway.
So you're not removing any landscaping?
We're proposing.
We're hoping not to.
We're hoping not to. We're using.
Our position is that they encroached on the easement over the last 40 years by allowing a 25-foot tall hedge to grow there, which serves a lot of purpose for their building, and we'd love to leave it. We're just asking them to move the easement over a few feet so we don't have to touch anything and go right over the pavement that's there.
So then...
That'll be resolved before we have a building permit.
Yeah, my comment is to know what type of landscaping is being provided, because this is what scared me, was the shadow of all this green stuff, and then your proposed, and I didn't know what was being removed.
This is the existing hedge, and this is shadow.
Correct.
I believe.
So...
We'll show you photos of that. Yeah. It's a 20-some foot high.
And it provides screening for the people who live here of this, which they really want, and we're all for them keeping.
Okay, great. Let's move to comments. If no one wants,
I can go first.
All right, go first.
Really appreciate the applicant's design changes to the Delavina Street elevation. I think the previous design looked disconnected between the bottom and the top, and it feels more integrated now and is more playful. And I think it's gone a long way to kind of mitigate the three-story nature of the project. So I don't have a problem with the 3 stories. I think it's tucked in the back. It's very minimized and subdued on Delavina Street. So I think the project was successful before. It's even more successful now, and I really appreciate the work done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone next?
My way.
Go. It doesn't matter. Anybody in any order.
Yeah, I mean, overall, personally, I do like the project, and I'm just really have a little feeling with the 3-story element, especially facing Delavina. The back I really don't have an issue with. If an issue I probably have with the remaining 3-story facing the front.
Okay. Somebody else?
I have a few comments, but pretty much agree with what was just said by Scott. This building height thing, I also had a problem with the, it says level 3, 25.8, top of roof 37.10. Top of roof to me is like either the top of the framing or the top of the plate. Does not mean top of parapet. But if you were to say top of parapet, then that would mean that the deducting for the parapet and the roof construction, at least 2 feet of construction, and so you're down to maybe a 10-foot ceiling height. And if you make it 3 feet, then that's 9-foot ceiling height. But I think that the top of roof or / parapet should be clarified, and maybe that could come down a foot or two to make it 9-foot ceilings on the second floor.
I think that should have said top of parapet, not roof.
I'm sorry?
I think that should have said top of parapet and
Oh, I
not
see.
roof.
Okay. And I'd like to compliment the applicant on the pursuit of what he called warm modernism. I think that's a great thing to do in this day and age, and I do it myself, and I think it's appropriate for this project. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I would agree with Tip's comment about that third-story massing. I do appreciate you bringing down that second-story element to a flat unit on the second floor on the west side of the project, and would encourage you to study those ceiling heights and parapet heights prior to coming back. I echo Howard's comments about the warm modernism and would encourage the applicant to find more ways to bring in more warmth with the doors, with extra wood treatments and wooden elements as you see fit, and work that into the design.
I agree with those the latter comments that Stephanie made about adding additional warming elements, and I also agree with Scott's initial take on it that it's acceptable in terms of mass, bulk, and scale, and appropriate for the neighborhood as long as we keep those ceiling heights at 9 feet.
I'll chime in. I think it's a great project, and I like the fact that this is pushed back and you have a 2-story element here and then the 3-story element here. And what surprises me about a couple of the board members is being concerned about the 3-story element here when we had a project that was at I want to say Gutierrez and Salsa Street, and it was 3 stories on a corner. And that was blessed by this building. And here, this is mid-block with other larger buildings, and there's now a question about the 3-story element, which here I find it's appropriate and works because you actually have a 1-story, and you have this modulation that's happening, and the building stacks up. So the massing of this building is wonderful and playful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a straw vote on that so we know whether we're supposed to be changing the 3-story? I mean, it sounds to me like most of you are okay with it, and a couple people question as long as we lower this to the 9-foot ceilings.
Yeah, can I clarify that issue? I mean, I think you can live with the 3-story element. I just feel that maybe you can look at the plate height a little bit and see if it, it should be 9 feet. I agree with that. That should be at least 9 feet minimum for the ceiling height on the 3rd floor. And I think that probably would help a little bit to look at that, bring it down. But I wouldn't per se have a problem with the 3-story. I'm just debating.
Okay. No, that's... anyways, this is just comments only, and you'll return for project design approval. Do you want a straw vote on how many people can support the 3-story element? Yes, please. So let's... how many board members can support a 3-story project here?
Oh.
A 3-story front elevation.
Okay.
The way it's being presented.
Step back.
As presented.
Right? The way it's being presented.
Yeah.
Who can support the 3-story project as presented?
So it's everybody but pool?
No, I'd just say it's not as compatible with I don't say the 3-story elements are wrong for the project in general, but I think that if they could be located further back on the property, then the better. For that wedding cake kind of stepping back that we always we strive for. And I think that this is a much different project than the one on Gutierrez Street. It's a much more urban environment, and this is an area where there are predominantly 1-story buildings all around it.
Great.
So, 2-story. I'm very familiar with that, but I think it's farther up and.
So let's make a motion and be indefinite continuance because there's a few things on his to-do list. If you don't mind, I guess I can make a motion and someone can first and second it. Applicant to return back to full board, and the applicant is to resolve any issues having to deal with the floodplain and provide notation on how it's going to be addressed if it is an issue. The applicant is to return with information about the paving necessary at the easement off-site and any landscaping that is to be maintained or replaced. Applicant is to return with a color board and indicating building materials and some basic introductory details, windows, flashing, roof parapets, and such. Applicant is to have a conceptual landscape plan, and with that, a conceptual stormwater management project plan addressing concerns, because you will need it for final, but that's beginning of your landscaping issues. The board understands that the second and the third floor will have 9-foot interior spaces, and the applicant is to revise his sections to say what the top of parapet is versus the top of roof. Does someone want to first and second that?
Second.
Second and first. Any additional comments?
Yes, return with any exterior light fixtures shown on the elevations.
Perfect. And sure. Anything else? And if that's all, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Great. Thank you very much.
And that concludes ABR for today, being July 7th. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark